have been vocal calls, especially here in the UK, to boycott Qatar in the World Cup, FIFA World Cup 2022. Well, my question is, where the heck have you guys been? If you boycott Qatar, the UK economy is gonna go down the toilet, mate. More so than it currently is.
This Islamic channel's takes on boycotting Qatar is so bad, I just had to share it with you.
Because this is the same Qatar that this year has invested £10 billion in the UK economy. And not to mention, this same UK will be providing the security for this World Cup. Again this year, royalty accepted a £5 million donation to its charity from this alleged country that's violating human rights. In fact, in total, Qatar has invested £40 billion in UK's economy. And not to mention that they own major shares in companies like Barclays, yes, Barclays Bank, BA, British Airways, the aeroplane service of this very country, and Heathrow, the main airport in this country, and of course Sainsbury's. They own large swathes of the capital and iconic places like the Shard, Canary Wharf, Harrods, and the London Stock Exchange.
First of all, if you know anything about economy, you would understand that these amounts that he's mentioning are a very small percentage of UK's economy. Second of all, when it comes to foreign investments, Qatar's investments in the UK are very small compared to some other countries like the United States, the Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, Japan, France. Also, it's not like Qatar is going to stop its investments in the UK because of boycotts on the World Cup. The point of boycotts are to use an event to put pressure on certain institutions and countries and to bring more attention to an issue that will have far more effects on loss of credibility for a country and institution more than the economic costs. For some reason, this guy thinks that boycotting the World Cup means the end of economic relationships between Qatar and the United Kingdom. I don't know why. It's this type of black and white thinking that gives you such ridiculous takes. It's also amazing how so transparently this guy is putting the lives of thousands of migrant workers behind the economic considerations.
And somebody who exemplified this point and has been going viral amongst the Muslims was Piers Morgan. Let's react to his video.
Piers, let's turn to football. We're 4 days away from the opening of the World Cup. David Baddiel told us that he's staying home. That his version of football is staying home. Gary Lineker,
David Baddiel, isn't he the same guy that supports Zionism? I mean, what's this selective outrage all of a sudden?
Said he would.
Oh my Iblis, another case of whataboutism. See, if I wanted to do whataboutery, I would have told you that why are you showing selective outrage over boycotting World Cup in Qatar, saying boycott doesn't make any sense because of the economic considerations, but you weren't making the same point when Muslims decided to boycott France over Muhammad cartoons.
And also, I've got to say, I find a lot of this sports washing debate laced with rank hypocrisy. I mean, in the I read a column last week in which I went through all the problems that all the countries in the last 32 have. And I mean, for example, 8 of the countries in the last 32, that's a quarter of the countries in the World Cup final, outlaw homosexuality. 1 in 4 countries. So if you're going to use that as the stick to beat Qatar with, you have to then beat the other 7 countries. You don't have a World Cup. And if you don't have it in Qatar, which is the first Middle Eastern country to have it, where do you have the World Cup? Do you go to Africa, where many countries it's illegal to be homosexual? Do you go there? So that rules out that continent. Do you go to America, which has rather draconian laws about abortion, which play very badly, for example, in the UK?
Amongst many other things, the fact that they've invaded 50 countries since World War II, interfered in 30 democracies, majority democracies. I mean, William Bloom enumerates them in a book called Killing Hope, amongst, of course, other things. I mean, torture. The Senate report 2014 suggests, inhumane torture that was taking place by America.
But once you start putting your moral halo on,
right,
where does it stop? And who is morally clean enough to actually host a World Cup? Are we the country that illegally invaded Iraq, which then started a 20-year reign of terror by ISIS? Are we morally clean enough
Yep.
to host
I mean-
the
Okay.
World Cup? I mean,
So-
I
so-
just think it's fraught with hypocrisy.
So a lot of
He's right. I mean, the Iraq war was illegal, and because of that, ISIS was born. Not to mention that in the last 100 years, there hasn't been a single year in which the UK has not been part of a war or an invasion of some sort.
Okay, wait a second. Other countries' crimes and human rights violations is an argument for us not taking any actions over Qatar's human rights violations? The argument seems to be if we want to take actions against Qatar's human rights violations, then we should take action against all other countries' human rights violations. I mean, think about the reasoning that these people are using. They are excusing Qatar's human rights violations because of other countries' human rights violations, but yet they themselves are accusing and bring pressure to, especially this Islamic channel, constantly condemns Israel and United States human rights violations. But if you wanted to use their own argument against them, then they shouldn't be bringing up Israel or United States human rights violations because, hey, Qatar does it as well, Saudi Arabia does it as well. So you guys don't speak against those countries' human rights violations. So why would you, based on your standard of speak against all or none, and given that you don't speak against all, you shouldn't be speaking at all against United States or Israel's human rights violations. I mean, it's your standard, not mine. Look, why are you not applying your own standard to yourself? Just because we fail to stop all the world's evils, it doesn't mean that we should stop trying to reduce some of it. And it's a group effort. We all have to pick our battles. Like, the human rights violations of other countries obviously needs to be responded to, but you as an individual can pick and choose which ones you want to pick up. But you, at the same time, if other people, like let's say for example, you want to focus on United States human rights violation and not other countries, but you can do that. That's completely fine. You're not a hypocrite. You're not a hypocrite if you want to pick and choose and focus is basically fine as long as you don't stand in the way of other people calling out human rights violations of other countries or other issues that they want to focus on, right? Let's say country A and B and C are all causing human rights violations, and I try to focus on A because maybe I'm more familiar with it or I'm more passionate about it. That's not hypocrisy. Some level of specialization is required, especially when it comes to activism. So you're not a hypocrite if you don't focus on B and C and only focus on A. But you are a hypocrite if you focus on A, but when another activist focuses on B or C, you call them out for it, or you try to act as if they are illegitimate for doing so. So, like this channel is doing. Like this channel focuses on human rights violations by countries like United States and Israel, or maybe France, but it doesn't mention human rights violations. It doesn't focus on or highlight human rights violations of Islamic countries, right? That would not be hypocrisy. But this channel is a hypocrite because when other people try to boycott or condemn Qatar for its human rights violations, it comes out and condemns them or tries to dismiss their cause. So again, going back to our example, you would be a hypocrite if while trying to condemn A, you stop or dismiss or belittle country activists who are trying to criticize B and C. You're not a hypocrite for merely focusing on A, because again, we all have limited time and resources.
Whataboutery there, is that basically a big
Whataboutery. So when somebody exposes your hypocrisy, it's whataboutery.
So many people don't understand the difference between exposing hypocrisy and committing whataboutery. If you bring attention to double standards, you are exposing hypocrisy. If I condemn Qatar but don't have any issues with US war crimes in Iraq, you can expose my hypocrisy. The thing is, Piers Morgan is not even aware if these activists have or do not have any issues with other human rights violations. My guess is that they do have issues with other human rights violations, given that they are activists, so there's no hypocrisy to expose. Whataboutery is different. Whataboutery is when a wrong is highlighted, you bring attention to another wrong so that you can excuse the first one. Basically what these people are doing. Activists are trying to bring attention to Qatar's human rights violation, and you are trying to dismiss it by bringing up other human rights violations. Let me make it simple. If you say, if A is wrong, then B is also wrong, good, you are correcting double standards or exposing hypocrisy. But if you try to dismiss A being wrong because B was also wrong, then you are committing whataboutery, which is exactly the case here.
Whataboutery is fact.
Well, it's
Okay, Piers Morgan must be an idiot because he just said it's not whataboutery, it's a fact. As if it being a fact makes it not whataboutery. In fact, it has to be a fact for it to be a whataboutery. Think about it. If your mom comes to her child and say, why didn't you clean up your room? And he says, well, my brother also didn't clean up his room. That is obviously whataboutery. It's a fact. The brother didn't clean his room, but that doesn't make it not a whataboutery. In fact, if it wasn't a fact, then it wouldn't be a whataboutery. Imagine if he said, well, my pink elephant also didn't clean his room. Then it would be just weird. It wouldn't be whataboutery, it would just be non-factual. The reason why whataboutery is fallacious reasoning is not that you said something that is not factual. You used a fact as a way to dismiss or reduce attention on another fact.
thousands of migrant labourers that have died in the making of.
And that's bad, of course. If that's proven, that's ridiculous. And it should be investigated independently and legitimately.
Well, it has been investigated. Maybe you should have looked into it before you made this video. In fact, the reason why it has been investigated is the outrage that you are dismissing right now. He just says it should be investigated as if these things just happen. Do you know how much effort and activism is required for you to force different organizations and institutions and human rights advocacy groups to pay attention to a human rights violation? It's exactly the type of outrage that is right now being demonstrated here. So if you are in favor of these things being investigated, you should actually look at why they were eventually investigated.
I mean, is that a kind of like Piers Morgan doesn't really care about gay rights?
Would you ever go to the Middle East?
I haven't been for a while.
Oh, would you go to the Middle East? I haven't been for a while. Yep, would you go to the Middle East though, woman? Answer the goddamn question.
Would you go to the Middle East?
Okay, he's asked again.
I would.
Right, end of the debate.
Why is that the end of the debate?
Well, if you don't agree with what they do, don't go there.
Why is that the end of the
Well, I don't
debate?
think that's the same thing, is it?
Wait, I've ended up liking it. Alright, go on. Keep that light. Hang on a minute. Of course that's the end of the debate. You would go to Qatar. You wouldn't boycott it. He's going to Qatar. He's not boycotting it. End of debate, mate.
These people congratulate themselves for making the dumbest points. What does going to the Middle East have to do with this? Supporting a boycott to bring attention to a cause doesn't mean you are in favor of never interacting with everything and anything associated with it. This is another example of black and white thinking. They think you either have to do everything or do nothing. You know how many human rights violations would go unchallenged if that was the standard? You can boycott the World Cup to bring attention to human rights violations and still go to the Middle East. One does not contradict the other. Seems pretty obvious. If you want me to make more videos making such obvious points that shouldn't need explaining but apparently they do, then support this channel by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. Hitting the bell icon and leaving a comment helps as well. Thank you so much for your support.